The poor waitress was denied a ride in the rain. The mafia boss held an umbrella and said, "Raventon does not just rain. It attempts to drown its inhabitants. The water falls in sheets, heavy and cold, driving sideways in the wind that tunnels between the old brick buildings." I felt the spray hitting my ankles, plastering the thin black fabric of my work pants to my shins until they were numb. I was huddled under the failing canvas awning of the Crown Street diner. It was 2:05 in the morning. My shift had ended 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes I'd spent watching my phone screen with a growing knot of dread in my stomach. The neon sign above me, the one with the cracked O, buzzed a sickly pink open into the wet dark. I stared at the screen, the blue light harsh against the gloom. Canceled. The rideshare driver had accepted the fare, driven to within 2 blocks of the diner, and then, poof, vanished from the map. A second later, the notification your driver has canceled due to a high-risk pickup area. High risk, I muttered, the words tasting like acid and stale coffee. This was just Crown Street. This was my walk home when the weather was decent, but tonight, the sky had opened up, and the app had decided I was stranded. The diner door clicked shut behind me. The sound final, Barry, the night cook, was locking up. He gave me a sympathetic shrug through the glass before pulling the metal grate down. He wouldn't offer a ride. He lived in the small apartment upstairs. I was alone. Alone with the rhythmic drumming of water on the pavement, the gurgle of the overflowing storm drain, and the hiss of the occasional car speeding through the intersection, sending up tidal waves of gray water. I pulled my thin jacket tighter. It was useless. The damp had already settled deep into my bones. My feet, throbbing after 8 hours of running plates, felt like 2 blocks of ice. It was a 40-block walk to my apartment on Solace Avenue. I'd have to do it. I was trying to work up the courage to take the first step when a new shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness of the alley across the street. He wasn't there, and then he stepped out from the corner where the street lamp had been busted for a month. The only light catching him was the reflected bleed from the diner's sign. He held a black umbrella, taut and gleaming, a perfect impenetrable circle of defense against the chaos. He moved with an unnerving calm, as if the deluge was a minor inconvenience he had already mastered. He wore a charcoal gray suit, not the kind of suit you see in this neighborhood, unless someone was attending a funeral or a court date. This was different. It fit his shoulders like it was woven for him, not bought off a rack. His shoes, expensive leather, were dark with water, but his pace was unhurried. He stopped about 5 feet away, just outside the meager protection of my awning, letting the rain hammer down around him. He didn't look at me. Not at first. He looked at the street, at the passing headlights painting slick, transient colors on the wet road. "Come with me," he said. His voice was low, not a shout, but it cut through the sound of the storm as if it had its own frequency. Or wait until the rain turns into a storm. I froze. Every lesson my mother ever taught me, every self-defense article I'd ever skimmed, screamed in my head, "Don't talk to strangers. Don't get in cars. Don't. But I wasn't a child. I was a 24-year-old woman with aching arches and rent due in 3 days. I looked at him, really looked at him, and a jolt of recognition hit me. I knew this man. Not knew him, not really. He was booth 4. He came in maybe twice a week, always after midnight, when the diner was empty save for a few lost souls. He always sat alone in the back booth. He always ordered black coffee, which he drank slowly, and a slice of apple pie, which he rarely finished, and he always left his tip on the table, smoothed out bills totaling exactly $46, a strange, specific number, a number that had saved me more than once. We called him the gentleman boss behind his back, a stupid nickname the kitchen staff had picked up from some rumor about him owning half of the action down in Harborview. I just called him Booth 4. His eyes found mine. They were dark, and in the neon glow, unreadable. They weren't threatening. They weren't kind either. They were just certain. as if he had already calculated my response, my hesitation, and my eventual acceptance, and he was simply waiting for reality to catch up. "I'm going to Solace Avenue," I said, my voice sounding weak and thin, easily swallowed by the wind. "I know," he said. "Matteo Valente. That was his name. I'd seen it once, months ago, on the credit card slip before he had switched permanently to cash." As if summoned by his certainty, a car slid to the curb. It was black, a sedan so clean and polished the rain beaded on it like mercury before rolling off. It didn't have a rideshare sticker on the windshield. The engine was so quiet I hadn't even heard it approach. Matteo took a step toward me. He tilted the large umbrella, extending it over my head before I had even agreed to move. The sudden absence of rain pounding on my scalp was startling. I was enveloped in a small bubble of quiet, smelling the faint, clean scent of wool and something metallic, like the air before lightning. He held the umbrella steady, angled toward me, letting the runoff sluice down his own left shoulder. The fine wool of his suit jacket darkened instantly, soaking through, but his expression didn't change. He didn't seem to notice the cold. He put his free hand on the small of my back. He didn't touch me, not skin to skin, but I felt the heat of his palm hovering an inch from my jacket, a gesture of guidance, not force. "Elena." He knew my name. Of course he knew my name. It was stitched in white thread on my apron, which was currently balled up in my bag, but hearing him say it felt different. It felt like ownership. I took the 2 steps from the curb to the open rear door. My wet sneakers squeaked on the pavement just as I was ducking my head to get in. A flash of movement caught my eye from the pawn shop across the street. 2 men. They were trying to look casual, huddled under the shop's metal awning. But they were failing. They were too alert, too focused. They wore matching dark blue windbreakers, slick with rain. I could just make out the logo stitched on the breast, a stylized G and W. Graywatch Solutions. I'd seen their vans around, a private security firm that had sprung up overnight, their guards always looking more like thugs than protectors. One of them was holding up a phone, brazenly taking pictures of the diner, of the front door, of the exact spot where I had just been standing. A cold, sharp fear, entirely different from the rain, pricked my spine. I slid onto the leather seat. It was impossibly soft and warm. Matteo Valente folded his umbrella with a sharp hydraulic thwack and got in beside me, bringing the clean scent of wool and ozone into the car. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing the world out. The silence inside was absolute. The roar of the storm was reduced to a distant, muffled tapping. Matteo leaned forward, just enough for the driver, a large silhouette behind the partition, to hear him. "Solace Avenue, number 12, he said. His voice in the enclosed space was different, deeper, darker. It held an authority that didn't ask. It stated. It was the kind of voice that expected obedience and always received it. Take the well-lit route. The driver nodded once, a brief dip of his head, and the car pulled away from the curb, smooth as glass. I watched the Crown Street diner slip away, its pink neon blurring in the deluge. I watched the 2 men from Graywatch turn as our car passed, their faces obscured by hoods, watching us go. I turned my gaze to the side window. We were passing under the overpass, the city lights of downtown glittering ahead like shattered glass. The rain lashed against the safety glass, distorting the view. The drops chased each other down the pane, merging and splitting, running in complex patterns that looked less like water and more like a code, like a language I was never meant to understand. I risked a glance at the man beside me. He was staring straight ahead, his profile cut like stone, the shoulder of his expensive suit dripping silently onto the plush floor mat. He didn't seem to mind. My heart was hammering, a frantic bird against my ribs. I understood, with a sudden, sinking, terrifying clarity, that this was not about a rideshare. This was not about getting out of the rain. This was the moment I stepped into his world, and I knew, instinctively, that worlds like his didn't let you just visit. The sedan moved through the flooded streets of Raventon with an insulated, heavy grace. Inside, the world was reduced to the whisper of the tires on wet asphalt and the rhythmic click of the windshield wipers. It was warm. The heated leather seat felt like it was seeping life back into my frozen legs. I sat perfectly still, afraid to move, afraid to drip on the immaculate floor. Matteo Valente stared ahead, his damp shoulder a dark patch in the car's dim, ambient light. He hadn't spoken since he gave the driver my address. The silence stretched, pulling taut, until it was more unnerving than the storm outside. I counted the passing streetlights, each one a slow, yellow smear, 4, 5, 6. Then, his voice, quiet but filling the space. Are they threatening you? It was a single, precise question. Not who were those men, not why were they taking pictures. He already knew. He was asking for confirmation of the next logical step. My throat was dry, I swallowed, and the sound was too loud. I don't know. He turned his head slowly. His dark eyes met mine. The certainty I'd seen on the street was still there, but now it was focused, demanding. It was a look that didn't tolerate half-truths. "Tell me," he said. It wasn't a request. "I thought I was just being paranoid," I began, my words tumbling out in a nervous rush. For the last week, maybe 10 days, when I leave the diner after my shift, there's a car parked at the end of the alley. It just sits there, lights off. When I walk by, it follows for a block or two, then turns off. I took a shaky breath. I told myself it was just someone waiting for someone else. But tonight, seeing those men, the Grey Watch men. "They are not the ones you should be worried about," Matteo said. "They are just the hired muscle, loud, visible. They are a symptom. What is the cause?" Elena. How did he know? How could he possibly know this went deeper? "My apartment building," I said, the admission feeling dangerous. "The building was sold about 2 months ago to a new landlord, a charitable fund called the Vermilion Trust." I spat the name out like it was poison. "They're not a charity. They doubled the rent. No warning, just a notice slipped under the door. Said it was for urgent structural improvements that never happened. People started moving out, people who had lived there for 20 years. Mrs. Gotti in 301, the Diaz family in 212. They were scared. They were being forced out," Matteo stated. "Yes, they offered buyouts, but the amount was an insult. $500. Then the problems started. The water would go off for days, the heat in the middle of a cold snap. So, I did something. I looked down at my hands, clasped tightly in my lap. My knuckles were white. I sent an email to the City Housing Authority, to a reporter at the Raventon Ledger. I organized a tenants meeting. I told everyone to document everything. I complained. I used their name, Vermilion Trust. I told them what they were doing was illegal and immoral." Matteo tilted his head, a small, almost imperceptible movement. "Vermilion Trust," he said, tasting the name. "They are the new, clean hands of the Orchid Circle." I had never heard that name. Orchid Circle. A financial syndicate. They don't break legs, they break leases. They don't use guns. They use leveraged buyouts and shell corporations. They are buying Raventon, piece by piece, with clean money that isn't clean at all. Vermilion Trust is their laundry. Before I could process this, my phone, clutched in my hand, vibrated violently. The screen lit up. Unknown sender. My breath hitched. I never got texts from unknown numbers. I tapped the screen. It was an email, forwarded to my phone from an anonymous encrypted address. Subject: a word of advice, Miss Park. "We know you're a sensible girl. Stop the emails, stop the meetings. The attached is just a draft. The final version goes to your employer and the ledger if you proceed. Consider your future." Below the text was an audio file. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Matteo's hand moved, impossibly fast. His long, calloused fingers covered mine, steadying the phone. His touch was firm and strangely warm. "Play it," he commanded. I pressed the icon. A voice filled the car. My voice. No, of course I understand, my voice was saying, but it was slick, conspiratorial. An extra 1,000 a month sounds very fair. Yes, I can get the other tenants to back off. Just make sure the money is routed through the consulting fee, like we discussed. I gasped, snatching the phone back. That's not... I never said that. That isn't me. Matteo looked bored. He took the phone from my trembling fingers, raised it to his ear, and listened. He let it play for no more than 10 seconds, his expression unchanging. Then he pressed the stop button, the silence of the car rushing back in. It's not real, Owersi, he said, handing the phone back to me. The cadence is wrong. The breath in between words is synthetic. It's a deep fake, a cheap one. They have started a smear campaign. A cold sweat broke out on my neck. Worse than the rain. But who would believe it? Why would they do this? I'm just a waitress. I'm nobody. No, Matteo said, his voice dropping. He turned in his seat, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical weight. You're not nobody. You're the one who signed the paper. I stared at him, bewildered. What paper? 3 months ago, a Tuesday, just after 1 a.m, a delivery truck came to the diner. The driver had you sign for the manifest. My mind flashed back. It was a fog, just another double shift. Yes, I remember. It was just bottled water for the diner. Barry was in the cooler. I signed for it. You signed for bottled water, Matteo confirmed, but that manifest was listed as the final delivery for a shipment of charitable donations to a Vermilion Trust warehouse that had supposedly already arrived. That same night, the truck carrying the real donations, millions in untraceable bearer bonds, vanished from the Harborview docks. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture so horrifying I couldn't breathe. So when I signed, I closed the loop, I whispered, the words choking me. I was the last signature, the one that made the ghost shipment look real on paper. You became their legal blind spot, Matteo said, nodding slowly. An innocent waitress, working late, signing for water, the perfect, unwitting accomplice. They never thought you would cause trouble. They never thought the girl who validated their theft would be the same one to file a complaint against their trust. The car was slowing down. We were approaching the main roundabout, the one that led to Solace Avenue. The car felt too small, the air too thick. And tonight, Matteo continued, his eyes on the rain-slicked street ahead. This rain isn't an accident. The rideshare that canceled on you, the Grey Watch men, it was all a performance. This is the perfect weather to corner the vulnerable, to isolate them, to make them desperate enough to accept a ride from a stranger. He was right, I had been. The car stopped, not in front of my building, but just at the turnoff, partially sheltered by the old stone arch of the roundabout. The driver didn't turn off the engine. Matteo reached across me and opened the glove compartment. He didn't take out a weapon. He took out his umbrella, the same one from the street. It was dry now. He pressed it into my hand. The handle was heavy, solid. My driver will watch you go inside, he said. They won't try anything tonight, not now. I looked from the umbrella to his face. But what about you? I have another, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He leaned in, and I flinched, but he only looked at the umbrella in my hand. His voice was low, and it was not a suggestion. It was an induction. From now on, Elena, you walk under my umbrella. The car stopped, not at the roundabout, but pulling past it, right in front of the peeling green door of my building, number 12, Solace Avenue. It was less an avenue and more a narrow street that smelled of stale beer from the tavern on the corner and damp newspapers. He'll wait, Matteo said again, indicating the driver. I gripped the heavy umbrella he had given me. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His tone left no room for argument. I got out, the car door closing with the same heavy, soundproof thud. The rain was lighter here, shielded by the taller buildings, but it was still a persistent, miserable drizzle. Matteo got out of the other side. He didn't open his other umbrella. He just stood in the rain, the water instantly darkening his hair and plastering the shoulders of his already damp suit. He walked with me to the entryway. My hand was shaking as I tried to get the key into the old brass lock of the main door. "Let me," he said. He didn't take the key. His hand simply brushed past mine, and I saw a thin piece of metal flash in his fingers. He slid it into the lock. There was a quiet click, and the heavy door swung open onto the peeling linoleum of the lobby. I stared at him. "How did you—" "Your lock is 50 years old," he said, as if that explained everything. He held the door for me. The lobby was cold. The single yellow light bulb flickered, casting long, jumping shadows. The air smelled of mold and boiled cabbage. We didn't speak as we climbed the 3 flights of stairs. My apartment was in the attic. 4B, my sneakers, the ones that had been soaked hours ago, squelched on every wooden step. He walked behind me, his own steps almost silent, despite his hard-soled shoes. We reached the landing, and I stopped dead. My door was open, just an inch. A dark sliver of blackness against the warped white frame. "Stay here," Matteo said. His voice was no longer calm. It was the flat, cold command of a surgeon or a soldier. He didn't listen to me, obviously. I was frozen to the spot. He pushed the door open with 2 fingers. It swung inward with a faint groan, revealing the chaos inside. It wasn't violent destruction. It was meticulous, insulting. My single armchair was overturned. The cushions from my second-hand sofa were tossed on the floor. My small collection of books had been swept from the shelf. My kitchen cabinets were all open, the packages of pasta and cans of beans pulled out. My mattress was flipped sideways. But nothing was broken. Nothing was stolen. My beat-up laptop was still on the kitchenette counter. The jar where I kept my tip money, maybe $60 or $70, was untouched. They weren't robbers. They were looking for something. They were thorough, Matteo observed, his eyes scanning the room with a methodical, sweeping gaze. He stepped inside, his wet shoes leaving dark prints on my floorboards. Then I saw it. On my small, particle-board coffee table, in the exact center of the room, sitting on a patch of wood wiped clean of dust, was a USB drive. It was an old one, gray plastic, the kind you get for free at a trade show. I felt a tremor start in my knees. "I don't use USBs," I whispered, the words barely audible. My laptop doesn't have a port for that kind." Matteo pulled a pair of thin, black leather gloves from his inside suit pocket. He slipped them on with a quiet, stretching sound. He didn't pick up the drive. He knelt, examining it where it lay. He used a pen from his pocket to flip the small device over. There, on the back, drawn in a red permanent marker, was a small, elegant symbol, a stylized flower. "An orchid," Matteo said, his voice grim. "The sign of the orchid circle. They left it for you." "A warning?" I asked, my voice trembling. "A-frame," he corrected. "They've searched your apartment and found evidence they planted." A new wave of sickness rolled over me. I stumbled back toward the door, my hand grabbing the frame. My eyes drifted down to the floor of the landing, where my mail was scattered. The mail slot in my door was just a simple brass flap. They must have tossed my mail when they came in. A stack of junk food coupons, a bill from the electric company, and one official-looking cream-colored envelope. I picked it up. It wasn't postmarked. It had been delivered by hand. My name, Elena Park, was typed in the corner, a very official-looking seal, a gavel, a set of scales, and the words, Metropolitan Integrity Bureau. I had never heard of them. Matteo took the envelope from my fingers. He didn't open it. He held it up to the dim light from the hallway, his head tilted. Then, using his pen, he slit the top open. He slid out a single, heavy-stock sheet of paper. It was a summons. I was requested to appear at an address downtown tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., to clarify discrepancies related to unsanctioned personal income. A faint, thin smile touched Matteo's lips. It held no humor. It was the coldest expression I had ever seen. "There is no Metropolitan Integrity Bureau," he said. It isn't on any state or federal registry. It's a legal scare tactic. They put the fake audio, the USB, and this summons in play all at once. They are building a case against a corrupt tenant who was paid to disrupt their charitable work. He took out his phone. It was sleek and black. No logo I recognized. He photographed the letter. His movements economical and precise. He typed a short, rapid message to someone, his thumb a blur, and slid the phone away. His gaze lifted from the letter and swept the room again. It stopped on the ceiling. "There," he said. I followed his look. Tucked in the corner, where the sloped roof met the wall, was a tiny black dot, a mini camera. It was a sloppy job. A thin wire trailed from it, tucked poorly into the plaster, leading down toward the outlet behind my sofa. They had probably installed it while I was at my shift, before the rain got bad. Matteo didn't hesitate. He walked to the overturned sofa, righted it with one hand, and unplugged the wire. He followed it up the wall, his gloved fingers tracing it, and then simply plucked the camera from the plaster. It came away with a small chunk of paint. He looked at it in his palm. Then he walked to the kitchen sink, picked up the one clean glass I owned, and dropped the tiny device into it. He turned on the tap and filled the glass with water. He set it on the counter, the camera submerged, its tiny lens staring up at nothing. "No more eyes in here tonight," Murray said. He turned back to the coffee table. He still didn't touch the USB. "If they want you to open it," he said softly, "we will disappoint them." He nudged it with his pen, sliding it to the edge of the table, and then swept it into an evidence bag he produced from another pocket. He went to my front door. He took a small, complex-looking tool from his pocket, not the simple pick from before, and began to work on the lock cylinder. "They jimmied it," I said stupidly. "The landlord will have to fix it." "The landlord super probably let them in," Matteo replied without looking up. "This lock is useless." There was a series of sharp, metallic clicks. He pulled the entire cylinder out of the door. He replaced it with a new, shiny brass one from yet another pocket. He worked with the silent, efficient confidence of a master craftsman. In less than a minute, it was done. He handed me a set of 2 new keys. "This one will hold," he said. He then took a small roll of what looked like reflective tape and placed a tiny, razor-thin strip of it across the bottom of the door, on the inside, where the door met the jamb. A simple alarm. If the tape is broken, someone has opened the door. Don't come in. Call. He was finally finished. The room was still a wreck, but it felt safer, contained. I looked at him, at his expensive suit soaked through, at his calm, dark eyes that had seen and processed all of this as if it were a simple checklist. "Why?" I asked. The question came out small, but it was the biggest thing in the room. "Why are you doing this? Matteo, you don't know me. I'm just the waitress at booth 4. You're the boss of Harborview." He turned to me. The water was dripping from his hair onto his face, tracing a line down his jaw, but he didn't wipe it away. He was still for a long moment. "A few years ago," he said, his voice very low, "I was on Kestrel Bridge. It was raining, not like this, a cold, miserable November sleet. A car pulled up. A man got out. He had a gun. He was contracted. Before he could clear the weapon from his coat, someone walked between us." He looked past me, as if seeing the memory replayed on my water-stained wallpaper. It was a woman. Looked like a student. She was carrying a bag of groceries and a broken umbrella. The wind had ruined it. She didn't see the gun. She just saw me, standing in the sleet, getting soaked. She stopped, and she held her broken umbrella over my head. She said, "It's not much, but it's something." She gave me her umbrella, and she walked on, pulling her own coat tighter. She saved my life, and she never knew it. His eyes focused back on me. "I never got to say thank you," he whispered. He shrugged out of his suit jacket. It was heavy, sodden with rainwater. He draped it over the back of my one upright kitchen chair. "It's dry on the inside," he said. "Wear it if you get cold." He placed a small, black burner phone on the counter, next to the glass with the drowned camera. This is clean. It has one number in it, mine. When the rain changes direction, when they make their next move, you call me." He walked to the door, he opened it, then paused, his hand on the new, secure lock. "Bolt it after I leave," he said. And then he was gone, his steps fading down the hall, as quiet as he had arrived. I did not sleep. I sat in Matteo Valente's heavy, dry-lined coat, the wool still holding a faint scent of him, and I watched the thin, reflective strip of tape at the bottom of my door. I watched it until the gray, rainy dawn seeped into the attic room, confirming that the tape remained unbroken. I had not been visited again. I ignored the fake summons from the Metropolitan Integrity Bureau that lay on my table. I ignored the small, heavy burner phone he had left next to the glass of water, where the tiny camera was still submerged. I just put on my uniform, brushed the tangles from my hair, and went to work. The Crown Street Diner was my reality. It was my safe ground. I was wrong. It happened just before the usual 9 a.m. rush, when the coffee was fresh and the grill was sizzling. The bell above the diner door didn't jingle. It was shoved open, slamming against the wall and ringing with a violent, jarring clang. 2 men in those same dark blue Graywatch Solutions windbreakers strode in. They were the men I had seen last night, the ones taking pictures, but they looked bigger and more menacing in the daylight. They were followed by a third man, a weasel in a cheap suit who held a clipboard like a weapon. Mr. Henderson, the diner's owner for 30 years, came bustling out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. He's a small, nervous man who always smells like frying oil and anxiety. Gentlemen, can I help you?" he asked, his eyes darting between them. The man in the suit shoved the clipboard at him. "Metropolitan Safety Bureau," he snapped. "Routine inspection." My blood went cold. Metropolitan. The same word as the fake Integrity Bureau. This was the next step. "A safety inspection," Henderson stammered, his eyes wide. "We just passed our health inspection last month. Got an A+. This ain't about the food. Pop." The first thug said. He had a neck like a stack of tires, and he started walking behind the counter, toward the kitchen. "It's about the structural integrity, the wiring. We got an anonymous tip. You can't just—" I started stepping forward, my coffee pot still in hand. "We have a warrant," the suit said, tapping the paper. "Owner's signature required." Mr. Henderson, his face pale and slick with sweat, barely glanced at the paper. He fumbled for the pen attached to the clipboard by a greasy string and signed his name. He was terrified, and he was just a good man trying to keep his grill hot and his lights on. "No," I said. My voice was loud, too loud. The handful of customers at the counter, a few construction workers, and old Mr. Gable all looked up. The thug with the thick neck stopped. He turned to me, a slow, greasy smile spreading across his face. "What did you say, sweetheart?" "I said no," I repeated, my hand gripping the coffee pot so tightly my knuckles ached. "You can't be here. That warrant is fake." "Mr. Henderson looked like he was going to faint. "Elena, child, please," he whispered. Just let them look. It's okay?" The thug stepped toward me, getting right into my personal space. He was so close I could smell the stale cigarettes on his breath and see the burst capillary in his left eye. "You know a lot about warrants. Do you—" "Waitress. Maybe you should just focus on those coffee pots before you get hurt." He put a beefy hand on the counter and leaned in, his face inches from mine. "Or maybe we should start our inspection right here." I didn't back down. I couldn't. This was my place. These were my people. I felt the heat rising in my face, the adrenaline making my vision sharp and narrow. "I'd advise against that." The voice was quiet, calm, and cut through the diner's tense, greasy air like a chilled steel knife. Matteo Valente was standing just inside the doorway. He hadn't been there a second ago. The bell hadn't even rung. He was in a fresh charcoal suit, perfectly pressed, and he was holding his umbrella. The black one. It was open, indoors. He stepped forward with a movement so smooth it was almost casual. He inserted the umbrella between me and the Grey Watch thug. The hard, metal tip of the umbrella pressed lightly against the thug's chest, just over the sternum, forcing him to take an involuntary half-step back. The taut, black canopy of the umbrella was now a shield, a perfect circle of defense, between us. The thug looked down at the umbrella, then up at Mateo, his face twisting in disbelief. "What the hell do you think you're doing, pal? You can't open that in here." Mateo didn't look at the thug's face. He looked at the man's shoulder, where the rain from outside was still dripping onto the clean, checkered linoleum floor. "You're dripping rain onto the evidence," Mateo said, his voice soft, almost conversational. The man in the suit stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Sir, this is an official inspection on behalf of the Metropolitan Bureau. I'm going to have to ask you to remove yourself." Mateo ignored him completely. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, a fresh one, perfectly dry, and pulled out a simple, pale manila envelope. He slid it onto the counter, right next to the cash register and the bowl of complimentary mints. "You have 60 seconds, Mateo said, his gaze still locked on the first thug. The thug scoffed, a wet, rough sound. 60 seconds for what?" "To leave." Mateo's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, final as a judgment. "Or perhaps you'd prefer I call the Metropolitan Integrity Bureau. I have a direct line. I'm sure they'd be fascinated to see these. I'm sure they'd be interested to know their safety division is moonlighting." He tapped the envelope. The man in the suit, sensing a shift in power he didn't understand, grabbed the envelope. He pulled out the contents. They were photographs, glossy, clear, 8x10 photographs. I saw the top one clearly. It was a picture of the two thugs, the very same one standing in our diner, brutally beating a man in an alley. The Grey Watch Solutions logo on their jackets was perfectly, damnably visible. The next photo, which the suit shuffled to, showed them setting fire to a pile of belongings on a sidewalk, a homeless person's encampment. Those are doctored," the suit stammered, his face losing its thin sheen of authority and turning a blotchy white. "Are they?" Mateo asked. "The metadata says they were taken in the Harborview district, just last week. Seems like a lot of safety inspections happening over there. I wonder if the Raventon Ledger would be interested. Or perhaps your real employers, the Orchid Circle, would be upset their hired help is this sloppy, this visible." At the mention of the Orchid Circle, all three men froze. It was as if he had thrown a switch. "You have," Mateo said, glancing at a simple, elegant timepiece on his left wrist. 45 seconds. The thug with the thick neck looked at the suit. The suit looked at Mateo. He saw no bluff. He saw no anger. He saw nothing but absolute, unblinking finality. We're done here," the suit said, his voice suddenly hoarse. He shoved the photos back into the envelope. He tried to push it back toward Mateo. "Keep them," Mateo said. "A souvenir, a reminder to check the registry before you print your letterhead." The suit grabbed his two men by the arm. "Let's go, now." They turned and almost ran out of the diner. The bell jangled frantically, a sound of panicked retreat. The diner was silent for a beat. Then Mr. Henderson let out a long, wheezing breath and sat down hard on a stool. At the end of the counter, "Mr." Gable slowly raised his coffee mug in a toast. Then he started to clap, a slow, steady plap. 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 The two construction workers joined in. A small, strange, surreal ripple of applause. I did not clap. The adrenaline drained away in a sudden, cold rush, leaving a hot, sharp anger in its place. I rounded on Mateo, who was calmly, methodically folding his umbrella. "What was that?" I demanded, my voice low and shaking. "You can't do that. You can't just handle it." He looked up, and I saw a flash of genuine surprise in his dark eyes. "They were threatening you. They were trespassing on a property that was not theirs to inspect." "And I was handling it," I lied. "I wasn't. Not really, but I needed to be. You can't just walk in here with your quiet voice and your secret envelopes and fix my life. This is my diner. This is my neighborhood. This is my problem." Matteo studied me. His head tilted slightly. The applause died away. The customers suddenly found their coffee fascinating. "If that is what you want, Elena," he said, his voice perfectly level, "I will leave. I will not interfere again." He meant it. I could see that. He would walk out that door, and I would be alone with the fake summons and the orchid circle and the men who set fires in alleys. The anger deflated, leaving me feeling hollow and childish and scared. "But," he continued, placing the folded umbrella on the counter, "life is not fair to the polite. The world is run by men like them, men who sign fake warrants and prey on good people like Mr. Henderson sometimes. The only defense is an umbrella large enough to cover everyone else." I looked at the men who had applauded him. I looked at Mr. Henderson, who was already back at the grill, his hands shaking, but safe. He was right. I let out a long breath. "Okay." He waited. "Okay," I said again, more firmly, "but I set a condition." "Go on. If you're going to be my umbrella," I said, hating the weakness in the metaphor, "then I need to know the plan. I need to know everything, no more secrets, no more showing up and saving the day like some phantom. We do it my way, or at least, I need to know your way. I am not a piece you move on a board, Matteo. I am a player." A slow smile touched his lips. It was the same one from last night, but this time, it held a flicker of genuine, startling warmth. "I accept." He reached into his coat again. This time, he pulled out a folded piece of paper, not an envelope, a map. He spread it on the counter, over the day's handwritten specials. It was a simple tourist map of Raventon, the kind they give away for free, but it was covered in handwritten notes. He had marked a half-dozen locations in the Harborview district with small, precise circles, drawn in blue ink. "This is their charity arm," he said, his voice dropping so only I could hear. "The Vermilion Trust. These," he tapped a circle around a defunct bakery, "are the drop points. They're not dropping off food or blankets. They're dropping off inflated invoices." "Money laundering," I whispered, remembering his words from the car. "Of the highest order," he confirmed. "They buy a building for $500,000. They file invoices for $2 million in renovations from a shell company they own. They get a grant from the city for urban renewal based on that $2 million. They kick out the tenants, like you, paint the walls, and sell the renovated building for $3 million. They've tripled their money, and it's all clean, taxpayer subsidized." And the signature I gave, and I said, the cold dread returning, "It tied one of their seed shipments to the diner." "It did," he said. "It made you an unwitting accomplice, which is why you are now the perfect weapon." "A weapon," I recoiled. "You want me to keep playing the victim?" "I want you to keep playing the part they cast you in," he corrected gently. "The weak, stupid waitress. They are arrogant. They believe they can bully you. They sent those men today to scare you into silence. When you don't go silent, when you keep being a problem, they won't see a strategist. They'll just see a girl who is too dumb to know when she's beaten. And that arrogance, that is how we expose the entire ledger." It was a cold, brilliant strategy. It was also terrifying. I looked down at the map, at his hand resting near the edge. He wasn't wearing the gloves from last night. His hand was bare. It was not the hand of a man who just signed checks. It was a strong hand, the fingers long and elegant, but the knuckles were raised and calloused. There was a thin, white scar running from the side of his index finger down toward his wrist. These were the hands of a fighter, the hands of someone who knew how to use force, not just threats in an envelope. The question escaped me before I could stop it, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you, Matteo?" He didn't pull his hand away. He let me look. He turned his gaze from the map to my face. The diner, with its familiar smells of coffee and bacon, faded away. It was just the two of us, a battle plan laid out on the Formica counter. I told you, he said. His voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear it, his dark eyes holding mine. I'm a man repaying an old debt. I called the only person in Raventon I knew who wasn't afraid of shadows, because she lived in them, Nova Quill. We'd been on the high school paper together. I'd gone on to sling hash, and she'd gone on to run the Quillcast, the city's most paranoid and accurate investigative blog. I met her at her studio, which was really just a tiny, overheated apartment above a 24-hour laundromat, the entire space humming from a rack of dedicated servers. Mateo came with me. He stood by the door, a tall, silent figure in charcoal gray, taking up all the space in the room without moving an inch. He just watched, his presence a heavy weight, as I spilled the entire story to Nova. Nova, all nervous energy and flashing eyes behind thick-lensed glasses, didn't look at him once. Her fingers flew across 3 different keyboards, the clicking sound like a frantic insect. Vermilion Trust, Orchid Circle, Grey Watch, Fake MIB, she muttered, her eyes scanning a scrolling feed of data. Elena, you didn't just stumble into a bad lease agreement, you fell face first into the hornet's nest. But I think I just found a hornet who likes to talk. She spun around in her chair. Rooftop Bar Solstice. Tonight, 8 o'clock. There's a junior PR manager for Vermilion named Rickett. My sources say he loves to brag to pretty girls after his 3rd gin fizz. He's loose-lipped. He's our data trap. From the corner, Mateo's voice, flat and cold. No. Nova finally looked at him. It's the only way. Mr. Valente, he's sloppy. I can feed him a link, a fake donation pledge site that plants a tracker on his phone. It'll give us access to his calendar, maybe his contacts, but he has to click it. He'll only click it if he's trying to impress someone. It's too exposed. Mateo said, his gaze was fixed on me. I'm the player, remember I said, meeting his stare. I'm the one they already underestimate. I can do this. His jaw tightened, a small muscle nodding. I will be there. Solstice was a different world. It was high above the city, all glass and blue neon, with thin, pulsing music that sounded cold and empty. The air smelled like expensive perfume and ozone. I wore my one good dress, a simple black sheath I'd owned for 3 years. It felt like a costume. Mateo was 2 tables back, a solitary figure in the deep shadow of a large, ornamental tree, a glass of water untouched in front of him. He looked like a panther forced to sit in a glittering pet store, and he never took his eyes off me. Rickett was exactly as Nova had described. He had a wet handshake, a suit that was 1 size too tight, and an ego that filled the space around him. I played the part. I was Elena, the naive, wide-eyed girl, just fascinated by his good work. It's just so inspiring, I cooed, leaning in just enough. What you're doing for the community, this Harborview resettlement project. It's all about revitalization, babe, he slurred. It was his 4th gin fizz, not his 3rd. His eyes kept sliding down the front of my dress. We're giving those people a fresh start, a new opportunity. It's vision. You mean kicking them out? I said, widening my eyes as if in innocent confusion. Oh, I'm sorry, that's what some people say, but I just... Nah. He waved his hand dismissively, slopping some of his drink on the table. They're happy. We find them new places. He placed his hand on my knee, under the table. I tensed, but kept the plastic smile frozen on my face. I'd love to help. Maybe I could even donate, I said, sliding my burner phone across the glass table, Nova's fake Raventon Reborn pledge site already open. Can you show me how? I can show you a lot of things, he said, his voice dropping. His hand slid from my knee to my thigh, his thumb rubbing invasive circles on my skin. After we're done here, we could... Before I could even invent an excuse to recoil, a shadow fell across us. Mateo was there, and he had made no sound. The entire rooftop, with its chatter and cold music, seemed to fade away. Rickett looked up, his face flushed with annoyance. Hey, get lost, pal. We're in the middle of a... Mateo didn't look at Rickett's face. He looked at his hand, the one on my thigh. He reached down and placed his own hand on Ricketts' wrist. He didn't grab, he didn't squeeze, he just lifted. It was a gesture that was as soft as courtesy and as unyielding as a steel bar. Ricketts' eyes widened, his face going pale as the pressure on his bones became undeniable. His hand flew off my leg as if he'd touched a hot stove. "I believe the lady is uncomfortable," Matteo said. His voice was a quiet, polite rumble, but it carried more menace than a shout. "Who the hell are you?" Rickett hissed, rubbing his wrist, trying to regain his dignity. "A concerned citizen." Matteo's dark eyes flicked to me. "Are you ready to leave, Elena?" I nodded, my throat tight, and grabbed my phone. As we turned to walk away, the burner phone buzzed in my hand, a text from Nova. He clicked. "We're in, and I've got more. Get out of there." We didn't speak until we were in the glass elevator heading down. "He touched you," Matteo said, his voice a low vibration. He was staring at the descending city lights, but he wasn't seeing them. "I was handling it," I said, though my heart was still hammering. "I know." His jaw was still tight. "You did well." We met Nova in the alley behind the building. She was practically vibrating. He didn't just click, his calendar was wide open. The idiot. He synced his whole Vermilion account. "Matteo, Elena, they're having a private auction tonight." "An auction for what?" Matteo asked, his eyes scanning the alley mouth. His focus already shifted. "The rental rights to the low-income housing they're seizing. They're selling off the people's leases to the highest bidder before they've even legally evicted them. It's masked as a Botanical Society fundraiser. It's happening right now. At the old Northport Conservatory?" The Northport Conservatory, the massive, abandoned greenhouse on the edge of the industrial district, a glass palace left to rot. A cold, hard resolve settled over me. "I can get in." "Absolutely not," Matteo said, the words sharp. "Think about it," I pressed, turning to him. "They'll be looking for you, a man in a suit, a man who knows things. They won't look twice at a waitress with a tray. Nova, it's a catered event. Right, can you get me on the temp staff list?" "Elena, I have a team," Matteo began, his voice low and dangerous. "Your team is a hammer. Matteo, I'm the scalpel. You said it yourself. They think I'm weak. They think I'm stupid. Let me use that. I just need to get inside, get pictures of the auction, of the people bidding. Proof." He stared at me, his face a mask of stone. I saw a storm in his eyes, a conflict that was terrifying and new. He was angry. Or maybe, for the first time, he was scared. "Fine," he bit out. "One condition." The conservatory loomed against the night sky, a skeleton of rusted iron and glass, the rain tapping on its endless roof. The main hall was lit, music and laughter spilling out, but Matteo led me through a side entrance, into a dark, damp storage room. It smelled of old soil, burlap sacks, and mildew. "Nova is feeding your name to the catering manager's tablet now," he said. His voice was all business, cold and precise. He pulled a small, flesh-colored device from a metal case. "This is an earpiece. It's live. I hear everything you hear. You hear me. If you are in trouble, if you feel the slightest bit unsafe, you say the safe word, White Orchid. That's it. You say that, and I am coming in. Do you understand?" "White Orchid," I repeated, my voice steady. "Got it?" He stepped closer to fit it. The room was cramped, cluttered with stacks of terracotta pots and bags of peat moss. The only light was a single, bare bulb hanging from a rafter, casting stark shadows. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I could smell the faint, clean scent of mint from his shirt, mingling with the earthy smell of the rain that clung to his hair. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he brushed my hair aside to place the earpiece. His touch grazed the shell of my ear, and a shiver went down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold, damp air. My heart was hammering, a loud, sudden drum against my ribs. "Why aren't you afraid? Matteo," I whispered, the question escaping me before I could stop it. His hand froze, his fingers still tangled in my hair. He looked down at me. The bare bulb lit the sharp planes of his face, the darkness of his eyes. "I am afraid," he said, his voice a low rumble that I felt more than heard. I looked up, surprised. His certainty was gone. For the first time, I saw past the control. I saw the man. Of what? His gaze held mine. "Of not being able to keep you dry," he breathed, in the middle of my storm. The air in the small room crackled. The space between us, which was no space at all, felt charged, like the air before a lightning strike. He raised his other hand, the one with the calloused knuckles and the thin, white scar. He raised it slowly, as if fighting against himself, and touched my cheek. His thumb rested just below my eye, his skin warm and slightly rough against mine. It was not a caress. It was a question. He was waiting, giving me the chance to pull away, to flinch, to say no. I couldn't. I leaned into his touch, just a fraction, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. His eyes closed for a second. He bent his head, and his lips met mine. It was not a desperate, frantic kiss. It was warm and deep and shockingly solid. It was an anchor. It was a promise. It tasted of mint and rain and a strength I had never known. My breath hitched, and I heard his own breathing stutter. His hand, the one that had held a man's wrist, slid to the small of my back, not pulling me closer, not demanding, just holding me steady, keeping me balanced. A sudden, violent gust of wind howled outside, rattling the entire glass structure of the conservatory. The poorly secured door to the storage room blew open with a bang, slamming against the inside wall, a rusted, forgotten umbrella, hanging from a hook on the door, swung wildly on its loop, its broken metal ribs clattering like old bones. We sprang apart, our breathing ragged. We both stared at the rattling umbrella, then at each other. A small, awkward, breathless laugh escaped me. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his face, lighting his eyes. "Right," I said, clearing my throat, touching the earpiece to make sure it was secure. "Back to the storm." "Back to the storm," he agreed, his voice still thick. "Be safe, Elena." I stepped out of the storage room, my lips still tingling, my heart a frantic drum. I grabbed a starched white apron from a stack, tying it around my waist, and picked up an empty tray. I was now Elena, the temp waitress. I blended into the bustling, humid air of the conservatory's main hall. It was breathtaking, in a decadent, rotting way. Massive tropical plants, palms, and overgrown ferns pressed against the glass walls, their fronds slick with condensation. The rain hammered on the glass roof 30 feet above, a constant, roaring percussion. In the center of it all, a crowd of Raventon's elite, men in sharp tuxedos and women in glittering dresses, sipped champagne and laughed too loudly. They were gathered around a small, elevated stage, bathed in a soft, rose-colored light. "I'm in," I whispered, my voice sounding tight in my own ear. "I see you," Mateo's voice replied, a disembodied, intimate presence in my head. "Stay to the perimeter. By the west wall, there's a catering station. Just observe." I moved through the crowd, my tray held high. The air was thick with perfume and the sweet, cloying scent of lilies. I reached the station and began stacking empty glasses, my eyes scanning the room. On the stage, a woman stepped up to the podium. She was tall, impossibly elegant, with silver hair pulled back into a severe, perfect chignon. She wore a white silk suit that seemed to repel the humidity around her. She commanded the room with absolute silence, not by raising her voice, but by lowering it. "Thank you all for supporting the Harborview Rebirth Initiative," she said, her voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Your generosity tonight is not just charity. It is an investment in a cleaner, safer, more selective Raventon." "Who is that?" I whispered, loading my tray with fresh glasses. There was a long pause in my ear. When Mateo spoke, his voice was tight, as if carved from ice. "That is Aurelia Valente, my father's sister, my aunt." My blood ran cold. I looked at him. his silhouette a dark, motionless shape on a high iron-wrought balcony that overlooked the hall. Half hidden by a giant fan palm, he was staring down at her, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle knot even from here. This wasn't just a financial war. This was family. Aurelia clicked a remote. A large screen lit up behind her. It wasn't a slide of happy families. It was a cold, architectural map of Harborview, my neighborhood. Red circles were drawn over entire blocks, including my own on Solace Avenue. Phase 1, relocation, she said. Phase 2, demolition. Phase 3, the new Harborview residences. She smiled, a thin, satisfied expression. We are not just moving buildings, we are moving problems. And tonight, our most generous donors will be given the first opportunity to secure their place in that future. This was it, the polite, public face of the eviction. As the applause rippled, I moved, my tray a shield. I needed to find the real auction. I saw a small, roped-off alcove near the back, partially hidden by a curtain of hanging orchids. 2 Grey Watch guards stood there, but they were looking at the stage. I slipped past, pretending to retrieve an empty glass. Behind the curtain was a simple table, manned by the weasel in the suit I'd seen at the diner. Rickett, he didn't even recognize me. His eyes were glued to a ledger. A line of 4, maybe 5 men waited patiently. I watched. A man in a cashmere coat stepped up. He spoke quietly, slid a thick white bank envelope across the table and said, Solace Avenue, number 12, my building. Rickett nodded, made a check mark in his ledger, and handed the man a single, official-looking document. My heart stopped. The seal at the top was the same one from the letter I'd received, the gavel, the scales, the fake Metropolitan Integrity Bureau. Mateo, I whispered, my voice shaking with rage, my tray rattling. They're selling the leases right here, for cash. They're using the fake MIB papers, their priority rental contracts. They're legitimizing the whole scam on the spot. Stay calm, Elena. His voice was urgent in my ear. Nova's got the live stream running. She's pushing the MIB connection now. I could almost feel the digital world lighting up. Through my earpiece, I could hear Nova's frantic typing in the background of Mateo's audio feed. The feed is live, Mateo confirmed. She's broadcasting anonymous video, just panning shots of the crowd with your audio. My God, the view count just jumped. 10,000, 20. The comments are coming in. They're selling people. Auction of the invisible. His voice was tense with a new energy. The local news affiliates just picked up the link. They're sending trucks. A thrill, hot and sharp, shot through me. We were doing it. It was working. And then everything went black. The music died, the lights, the stage, the soft, rose-colored glow all extinguished. The only illumination came from the faint emergency exit signs and the flashes of lightning outside, which turned the glass walls into stark, terrifying mirrors. The roar of the rain on the roof suddenly sounded deafening. A woman screamed, the crowd surged, a wave of panicked, wealthy bodies. Then, new lights snapped on, not soft rose, but harsh, blinding red emergency strobes, casting the entire hall in a rhythmic, nightmarish pulse. Red light, blackness, red light, blackness. The main doors slammed shut with a heavy, metallic thud. It's Grey Watch, a new, booming voice announced over a megaphone. Nobody move. There is a security threat in the building. We are initiating a dark protocol. Place all mobile devices on the floor in front of you. Now. I saw them, a dozen Grey Watch thugs, fanning out, their dark blue uniforms and heavy boots stark in the flashing red light. They were seizing phones. They were looking for the source of the leak. They were looking for me. Mateo, I hissed, my heart leaping into my throat. They've cut the power. They're locking us in. I see it. His voice was no longer calm. It was a whip crack. Move to the north exit. My team is on the way. Just get to the north exit. I started to move, but the crowd was a panicking herd, pushing me back. A Grey Watch guard saw me, saw my tray, saw me not putting a phone down. He pointed, "You waitress, stop." I panicked. I threw my tray of glasses at his feet. It shattered with a crash that was lost in the noise. I ran. "White orchid," I screamed into the void, my voice raw. "Mateo, white orchid." The response was instant. The glass wall behind the stage exploded inward, shattering in a waterfall of sound. The pounding music from the party didn't just return, it erupted. A blast of industrial, deafening bass that shook the building. Mateo's team, they flooded in, dressed in black, moving with a fluid, terrifying precision. It wasn't a rescue, it was an invasion. The conservatory became a war zone of flashing red lights, pounding music and shouting. I kept running, fighting my way through the chaos toward the north exit. I looked up at the balcony where Mateo had been. He was gone. But someone else was looking up. Aurelia Valente. She was standing calmly by the stage, untouched by the panic, as if she were the still center of the hurricane. She was looking up at the high, broken glass, at the silhouette of one of Mateo's men against the stormy sky. And she smiled. A cold, knowing, triumphant smile. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't scared. She was pleased. "You came," she said, her voice inaudible in the din, but I read her lips in the strobe's flash, "just as I knew you would, nephew." A horrifying realization dawned on me. The auction, the money, the MIB. That was just the bait. He was the trap. This was all an elaborate plan to draw him out, to catch him in the act of attacking her. A new group of Grey Watch guards, bigger, more heavily armed, flooded in from the side doors, ignoring the panicked guests, their focus entirely on Mateo's team. Elena, Mateo's voice was frantic in my ear. "The north exit is compromised. They're blocking it. Turn right. Go past the succulent garden. There's a service door." I turned, pushing past a crying woman in a fur coat. I ran down a darker corridor, the flashing red light barely reaching here. I saw the sign, "Antique Orchid Exhibition, Staff Only." But the door at the end of the hall, the one marked Exit, was chained, a heavy, industrial chain and a new padlock. I was trapped. "Mateo, it's locked. They've locked me in." "Elena, get back!" But it was too late. I heard the heavy thud of boots behind me. The Grey Watch guards, the ones who had been chasing me, were hurting me, cutting off my retreat. They weren't trying to grab me. They were directing me. I had only one way to go. I ducked into the Antique Orchid Exhibition room. It was pitch black, and the air was hot, humid, and smelled of decay and sweet vanilla. My hand fumbled along the wall for a light switch. My fingers found it. I flicked it. Nothing. The power was still cut to this section. But in the rhythmic, bleeding red flash of the strobes from the main hall, I saw it. In the center of the dark, suffocating room, sitting on a wooden pedestal, was a single, spotlighted object. It had its own battery-powered light. A small, gray plastic USB drive, identical to the one they had planted in my apartment. This was the final piece of the frame, the corrupt waitress, caught red-handed in a secure room next to the stolen data drive. They hadn't just been hunting me, they had been staging a play, and I had just hit my final mark. I stared at the small, gray USB drive, spotlit on its pedestal. The trap was sprung. This was the final photograph they wanted the conspiring waitress found in a locked, secure room, right next to the stolen data. A sharp, pressurized hiss echoed from the ceiling vents. A chemical smell, acrid and biting, burned my nostrils. Not pepper spray. This was thicker, industrial. White smoke, dense as fog, began to pour into the small, hot room. My eyes burned instantly. 1,000 needles. A dry, racking cough tore from my lungs. I scrambled backward, pulling the thin white catering apron up over my mouth and nose. It was useless. The gas was too thick. They were fumigating me, smoking me out like an animal, forcing me to stumble out into the main corridor, choking and blinded, right where they had their cameras and their fake MIB agents waiting. I slammed my shoulder against the locked door behind me, the heavy chain rattling mockingly. "Mateo," I choked out, my voice dissolving in the stinging fog. The earpiece crackled, his voice sharp with a new, raw urgency. "Elena, get low! Back away from that door! Move!" I dropped to my knees, the air marginally cleaner, but my eyes were streaming, my chest on fire. I couldn't breathe. The solid oak door behind me groaned, a sound of wood under impossible stress. Then came a sharp crack, like a giant's bone snapping. It was not a kick, it was something else, a hydraulic pop. The entire door jamb splintered, another pop, and the heavy chain snapped, its links whipping against the wall. The door flew open. Matteo stood in the doorway, a wraith against the flashing red lights of the hall. He wasn't in his suit coat. He was in his white shirt sleeves, rolled tight to his forearms, a small, black tool in his hand, a compact hydraulic jack, no bigger than a bottle. He didn't pause. He plunged into the smoke-filled room, his arm finding my waist, his grip like iron. He hauled me to my feet, lifting me almost off the ground. He dragged me out of the toxic fog, past the two Grey Watch guards who were standing there, waiting to catch me, their faces frozen in shock. They hadn't expected him. He didn't slow. He pulled me past the antique orchids, through a beaded curtain I hadn't seen, and shoved me hard into a narrow, dark gap. We were behind a massive 2-story wall of reinforced glass, an unfinished exhibit partition. We were in the 4-foot space between the new glass and the building's old, cold brick exterior. The world vanished. The pounding industrial music, the frantic shouting, the rhythmic, screaming red strobes, it was all muffled. A distant, frantic pulse on the other side of the thick glass. The only sound in our dark, narrow pocket was my own ragged, desperate gasping. I collapsed against the brick, my legs giving out, my entire body shaking in a violent, uncontrollable tremor. The adrenaline, the lack of oxygen, the sheer, paralyzing terror all hit me at once. They were waiting. I coughed, my throat raw. It was a stage. "I know." He was breathing hard, his back pressed against the glass, his body shielding me from the sliver of the chaotic hall we could still see. He shrugged out of his suit jacket, the one he must have retrieved, and wrapped it around my shoulders. It was heavy and warm from his body, and it smelled of mint and clean wool. It was an anchor. My eyes were streaming, burning tears I couldn't stop. He had put his gloves back on. He raised his hand, the black leather surprisingly gentle, and his thumb brushed the tears and soot from my cheek. His touch was firm, steadying my world. "Elena," he said, his voice low, urgent, "do you want to continue or am I getting you out? The choice is yours, right now." I looked up at him. His face was streaked with grime, his hair was damp, his dark eyes were burning with an intensity that wasn't cold, wasn't controlled. It was a raw fire. This was the man, not the boss. "Yes," I said, my voice hoarse, but it didn't waver. "I'm in. But, Matteo, no more secrets. I meant it. I walk with you, not behind you. I'm not your pawn." He stared at me for a long, heavy second. I saw the cost of the decision in his eyes. "Promise," he said. The word was a vow, heavy as stone. We can't stay here," he said, his head turning as a fresh wave of shouts erupted from the hall. "Aurelia controls this building. She'll have a fallback." He grabbed my hand, pulling me from our dark sanctuary, back into a dimly lit service corridor. We ran, his hand solid and warm around mine. We passed a door marked Plant Maintenance, authorized personnel only. He didn't slow, just hit it with his shoulder. It burst open. He pulled me inside, slamming the heavy wooden door behind us. The old, rusted lock clicked shut. We were alone. The world disappeared again. No strobes, no music, no shouting. We were in a narrow, glass-roofed potting shed, filled with the smell of rich, dark earth, clay pots, and fertilizer. The only sound was the rain. It was not a drizzle. It was a deluge, a furious, deafening roar, hammering on the glass roof just a few feet above our heads. It was a wall of sound, a chaotic rhythm that drowned out the world, isolating us in the dark, damp, earthy-smelling room. We stood there, panting, the adrenaline vibrating in my bones. It was so high, so sharp. It was almost painful. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. A wild, desperate, clinging need to be alive, to feel something other than terror and chemical burns. Mateo had his back to the door, listening, his body coiled, ready to fight. I looked at him, at the white shirt, damp with sweat, clinging to his shoulders, at the pulse hammering in the strong line of his throat, at the scar on his hand, pale in the gloom. He was real. He was here. He had come through the smoke for me. I was the player. I had made my choice. I didn't think. I moved. I grabbed the collar of his shirt with both hands, twisting the fine cotton in my fists, and I pulled him down to me. He made a low sound, a grunt of pure surprise, but he didn't fight it. His mouth found mine. The first kiss, in the other storage room, had been a question, a spark in the dark. This was the answer. This was the fire. It was not gentle. It was not polite. It was deep and desperate and demanding. All the fear and fury and confusion of the night, all the adrenaline and the rain, poured into it. It was a claim. His hands, no longer hesitant, slid from my waist up my back, his gloved fingers splaying wide, pulling me tight against him until there was no space, no air, no chaos. There was only the solid wall of his chest, the frantic beat of his heart against mine, and the deafening roar of the rain on the glass above us. His lips were hard, and I met his force with my own. I felt his legendary control crack and shatter. His hand moved from my back to my hair, his fingers tangling in it, tilting my head, his mouth claiming mine in a way that left no room for thought. It was too much. The world spun. My senses, already overloaded, threatened to short-circuit. I made a small, choked sound against his mouth, and my hand, which was still fisted in his shirt, found his wrist. I squeezed, hard, a single sharp signal. He stopped, instantly. He pulled back, his breathing as ragged and broken as mine. His eyes were black, a storm of emotions I couldn't possibly name. He didn't let me go. He just rested his forehead against mine. Our breath mingled, hot and white in the cold, damp air. My hands were still clutching his shirt. His hands were on my back, steadying me, holding me up. "Elena," he whispered, his voice rough, broken. "You are safe in my umbrella." He took a shuddering breath. "And you are safe in your own choice, always." A sudden, sharp crackle burst from his shoulder. Nova's voice, tinny, frantic, and ecstatic, ripped into our private bubble. "Mateo, Mateo, are you there? It's nuclear. The feed is nuclear. It's out. It's everywhere. The MIB contracts, the cash, the audio of them selling the leases. It's all public. The news vans are here. Greywatch is trying to block them, and it's turning into a full-blown riot. The data is out, Mateo, we won." We pulled apart, just enough to look at each other. He was still holding my shoulders. A slow, shaky, impossible smile spread across my face. He laughed. It was not a smile. It was a short, sharp, breathless bark of a laugh. He looked like a different man. He smoothed my hair back from my face, his expression turning serious again. But the ice was gone. "Back to the front line," he said. He straightened his shirt. I straightened his jacket, which I was still wearing. We were two partners, two soldiers, adjusting our armor after a battle. "My team secured the old staff tunnel," he said, his voice all business, but the warmth remained underneath. He unlocked the potting room door and peered out. The corridor was clear. "It's under the main furnace. It exits 2 blocks away, by the rail yard. My men are at the exit. They will not let you out of their sight until you are home." "And you?" I asked, pulling his jacket tighter. I didn't want to leave. "I'm not finished," he said. His eyes turned cold, the ice flooding back in, but it wasn't directed at me. "Aurelia set this trap for me. I intend to thank her for it." He led me to a heavy steel door at the end of the hall, one marked Furnace Room. He unbolted it, revealing a set of dark, concrete stairs leading down. The cold, wet night air rushed up to meet us. I stepped out onto the landing, into the rain. I turned to look at him one last time. I almost walked right into him. He was standing directly behind me, holding his umbrella, the black one. I hadn't even seen him retrieve it. He held it up, tilting it to cover me, shielding me from the downpour for the single step I took from the sheltered doorway to the covered stairwell. It was a small, reflexive gesture. It was everything. "Go," he said, his voice soft. "Be safe." I turned and ran down the stairs, wrapped in his coat, his scent and his promise. I didn't look back. I watched the darkness of the tunnel swallow her, the flicker of her borrowed coat the last thing to go. Only when she was gone, truly gone, did I allow myself to turn back. I walked out of the service corridor and into the war. The main hall of the conservatory was a masterpiece of chaos, a hell of my own making, painted in pulsing red light. The industrial music my team had unleashed was a physical force, a pounding, bass-heavy heartbeat that vibrated through the floor. A tactical weapon to disorient and confuse. My men, black-clad and efficient, had formed a perimeter, clashing with the disorganized but brutal force of the Grey Watch thugs. It was a stalemate of noise and shadow. And in the center of it all, she stood. Aurelia Valente. She was exactly where I knew she would be, by the ruined stage, untouched, the panic, the smoke, the screams of the city's elite, none of it reached her. She was the eye of the storm. She was holding an umbrella, a stark, shockingly white one, its canopy pristine against the red-lit chaos. It was not raining where she stood, but she held it as a statement, a scepter. She was smiling, a thin, satisfied, bloodless smile. Her silver hair was perfect. Her white suit was immaculate. I walked toward her. The crowd, the fighters, they all seemed to part from me, sensing a different kind of gravity, a concentration of power. I stopped 10 feet from her, the pounding music a wall between us. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "You brought the storm, nephew, just as I intended." I said nothing. I just watched her. "It's a very loud, very expensive mess," she continued, gesturing to the chaos with a manicured hand, "and all for a waitress. She must be truly remarkable in person." "This isn't about her," I said, my voice flat. "Oh, but it is," Aurelia purred. "It's always about the weakness, but I am a reasonable woman. I will make you an offer. Here, at the end of it all, give me the girl, and give me Raventon. Let me have my project, in exchange." She paused, her smile fading into something almost resembling sincerity. "I will ensure the Valente family name is kept clean. I will guarantee your safety from the Orchid Circle. They will forget you ever existed. You can have your quiet life, Mateo, the life you always pretended you wanted." I looked at this woman, my father's sister, the one who had taught me how to play chess, the one who had signed the order that got my father killed. "I don't sell people," I said. Her face hardened, the mask of civility dropping away. "You fool! You sentimental, stupid fool! You think this was ever about that waitress? You think this was about leases and a few $1,000,000? She stepped closer, the white umbrella held low, like a shield. "I built this. I arranged for the Grey Watch patrols. I created the Metropolitan Integrity Bureau from thin air. I even arranged for the girl to be the one to sign that manifest, knowing she was your pet project, your little charity case at the diner." She smiled again, and this time, it was all venom. "And the Vermilion Trust, the entire organization you've been chasing, I put your signature on the sponsorship charter. A magnificent forgery, if I do say so myself. When this all collapsed tonight, and it was always going to collapse, all the fake documents, all the stolen money, all the broken laws, they would all lead directly, irrefutably, to you. I was framing my own nephew to take the fall. The girl was just the spark to light your pyre." I let the silence hang for a long second. I watched her enjoy her moment, her confession. "It was a good plan," I conceded. I reached into my own jacket, the one I had given to Elena and retrieved. From the inside pocket, I pulled a small, leather-bound notebook, But you made a mistake. I don't make mistakes, Mateo. You used Orchid Office 7, I said. Her breath hitched. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible reaction, but I saw it, the slightest widening of her eyes. The office you keep in the old Telegraph building, the one no one is supposed to know about. I opened the notebook. This is the printer log from that office, from 3 months ago. It lists a very specific print job, a high-resolution scan and execution of a power of attorney document. My power of attorney, the one you forged. I turned the page, and this is the original contract you signed with Greywatch Solutions, the real one, not the one you faked for the city. This one is signed by you, Aurelia. As a private client, you paid them from an offshore account, an account which, as of 10 minutes ago, has been frozen solid by my associates in Zurich. Her mask did not just crack, it shattered. For one beautiful, terrible second, I saw her, not the matriarch, not the boss, just a woman completely and totally exposed. Then she composed herself. She threw her head back and laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was a sharp, ugly sound. Then she began to applaud, a slow, deliberate clap, her leather-gloved hands striking each other. "Bravo," she hissed. "Bravo, nephew. You have truly, finally, grown up. You have your father's stomach for this, after all." "I have my own," I said. Her eyes went dead. So be it. She pressed a small, silver button on a remote she held in her hand. Above us, the massive 30-foot panels of the conservatory's glass roof groaned. With a shriek of tortured metal, a dozen panels split open, opening the hall to the sky. The rain came down, not a drizzle, a cold, furious deluge. It hammered the floor, soaking the screaming guests, turning the entire room into a churning, wet nightmare. At the same moment, the locked side doors burst open. A new wave of Greywatch flooded in. Not the thugs from before. These were men in tactical gear, disciplined, armed. They fanned out, creating a new, harder perimeter. Aurelia smiled. Checkmate. I didn't move. I simply raised my hand and made a small, circular motion in the air. In the balconies above, my men, who had been fighting, suddenly stopped. They pulled back to the main exit doors. There was a series of heavy, metallic thuds as they dropped electromagnetic locks onto every single exit. The doors were now sealed from the inside. Her tactical team was now trapped in here with my tactical team. The guests were trapped. She was trapped. I was trapped. "It's a draw, Aunt," I said. Her face was a mask of pure fury. She looked at the panicked, soaked guests, the rich and powerful of Raventon, who were now her prisoners. She looked at my men, who had taken defensive positions. She looked at her own, who were unsure of their next move. She chose the path of the cornered animal. She chose cruelty. "Then the board will be cleared," she spat. She pressed another button on her remote. A new sound joined the din, the high-pitched whine of industrial pumps. From the sprinkler heads above, the ones meant to feed the exotic plants, a new mist began to spray, mixing with the cold rain. It wasn't the fumigation gas from before. This was different, an acidic chemical smell, like ammonia and burnt fertilizer. It was the nutrient spray system. A man beside me clutched his throat, his eyes wide. A woman screamed as the mist touched her skin, leaving red welts. It was a chemical irritant designed to burn, to cause panic, to force a stampede. The guests broke. They ran, screaming for exits that would not open. Aurelia stood under her white umbrella, perfectly dry, perfectly untouched, watching her investors choke and weep. I did not run. I opened my own umbrella, the black one, the one I had retrieved from the storage room. I stepped toward a small, elderly couple cowering against a pillar. I held the umbrella over their heads, shielding them from the rain and the worst of the chemical spray. The man looked at me, his eyes streaming, his face a mask of confusion and gratitude. Aurelia watched this, her lip curled in a sneer of absolute disgust. "This," she said, her voice rising above the screams, "this is why you will always lose. That sentiment, that pathetic Performative weakness. It will kill you. Mateo. I held the umbrella steady. I met her gaze, a queen under her circle of white, and I, a man under my circle of black, protecting two people I did not know. No, I said, and my voice was calm, and it was the truth. It's what keeps them on your side. And I saw her falter. For the first time, she took an involuntary step back. She looked at the guests I was shielding. She looked at her own trapped, armed men who were now looking at her. She realized in that single, rain-soaked, chemical-burned moment that she had not lost the fight. She had lost the room. She had lost the heart of the city she was trying to buy. I came out of the tunnel into a different Raventon. The air was cold. The rain was still falling. But the world was on fire. The man Mateo had stationed at the exit, a broad, silent man who looked like he was carved from the same stone as the railway bridge, didn't say a word. He just handed me a ringing burner phone, the same burner phone Mateo had left in my apartment. I pressed it to my ear, my hand covered in grime from the tunnel, shaking. Hello? Elena, oh, thank God! Nova's voice was a high-pitched, ecstatic shriek. It's out, it's all out. The Quillcast is melting its own servers. The video feed, the MIB contract photos. The audio of them selling the leases. It's everywhere. I stumbled away from the tunnel mouth, leaning against the wet brick wall of the rail yard. What's happening? Nova. A revolution! That's what, she cackled, and I could hear her furious typing. The second the feed went public, a group of pro bono lawyers, they're calling themselves the Raventon Freedom Legal League, announced an emergency class action suit. They're doing it live on a stream. The internet went digging. Your Vermilion Trust. They've already connected it to a dozen other shell companies, the Ruby Shells, they're calling them. The secondary investors are already releasing public statements, cutting all ties, claiming they were duped. I slid down the wall. The force of it, the speed, making me dizzy. The best part, Nova was almost shouting. The local news finally got their courage. They checked the city registry. The Metropolitan Integrity Bureau, no archive code. It doesn't exist. It never did. It's the lead story on every channel. Greywatch is trapped. They're pulling their logos off their vans right now, in the middle of the night, like thieves. I felt a bubble of hysterical laughter rise in my throat. And City Hall, the politicians on their payroll. Oh, Nova said, her voice dripping with pure, unadulterated joy. They just released a statement, the mayor's office. They are blaming the entire misunderstanding at the conservatory on unprecedented severe weather patterns. The rain, I whispered, in disbelief. The rain. And I just sent my reply to every reporter in this city. Rain doesn't sign contracts. Mayor, who signed the contracts? A black sedan, the same one I had been in hours ago, skidded to a stop on the wet street beside me. The passenger door flew open. Mateo got out. He wasn't wearing his jacket, just the white shirt, now soaked through and clinging to his shoulders, and the sleeves were still rolled up his forearms. He was wet, grime-streaked, and looked more alive than any man I had ever seen. The tactical, cold control was gone, replaced by a focused, burning intensity. He didn't ask if I was safe. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He just looked at me, his eyes locking on mine, and said one word. She's running. Nova's voice was still frantic in my ear. He's right. Elena, I put that tracker on Ricketts' phone, and his calendar synced with Aurelia's. Her car's GPS just hit the shoreway. She's heading for Orchid Pier, the old terminal. That has to be where they keep the hard copies, the real ledgers, the black books. I looked at Mateo. I'm coming with you. No, he said, the word final. You're safe. My men will take you home. You promised, I said, shoving the phone into my pocket, stepping right up to him, close enough to feel the heat coming off him. Even in the rain. You promised. No secrets, no hiding me. I walk with you. She is going to that pier to burn those books, and I am the only one in this city who knows what that fake MIB letterhead looks like. I'm your witness. Mateo, you need me. He stared down at me. The The rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead. He saw the new, hard line of my jaw. He saw that I was not the same girl he'd found shivering under an awning 24 hours ago. He saw a player. He nodded, a sharp, sudden dip of his chin. "Get in the car." The drive to Orchid Pier was a blur of wet neon and screeching tires. We didn't speak. I was on the phone with Nova, who was feeding us a live map of Aurelia's movements. Matteo was on his own phone, speaking in quiet, rapid Italian to someone I couldn't hear. The pier was a ghost town, a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and dilapidated warehouses, crouched against the black, churning water of the harbor. The wind howled, whipping the rain into horizontal needles. A single, expensive-looking sedan was parked haphazardly in front of Warehouse 4, the old incineration plant. The engine was ticking, the car still warm. "She's in there," Matteo said, killing the headlights. "Warehouse 4? She's going to burn the books." We could see them. 4 Grey Watch tactical guards at the front door. They were holding a tight perimeter. "They're expecting me," Matteo said, his voice dropping into that cold, strategic calm. "I'll be the distraction. I'll take the front. My men are 2 minutes out. They will lock down the perimeter." "I'm not waiting in the car," I said. I looked past the warehouse, at the complex network of gantries, rusted ladders and old conveyor belts that snaked between the buildings. I grabbed the small, high-powered flashlight from the glove box. I pulled the elastic from my wrist and yanked my wet hair back into a tight, high ponytail. My hands were shaking, but my eyes were clear. "Elena," he started, his voice a low warning. "I've worked enough late shifts at the diner to know every back alley, every service entrance, every shortcut," I said, my voice as hard as his. "I know how the guts of a building work. You stop the guards, I'll save the proof. Go." I didn't wait for his answer. I was out of the car, sprinting low, disappearing into the shadows of the containers before he could stop me. I scaled a slippery, steel external staircase, my ruined sneakers finding purchase on the rusted metal. I was on a high catwalk, looking down through a grime-caked window. And I saw him. Matteo walked out into the middle of the wide, rain-swept yard in front of the warehouse. He was holding his umbrella, the black one. He opened it with a quiet thwack, a single civilized man in a suit, standing against an army. The Grey Watch leader, a mountain of a man in black tactical gear, stepped out to meet him. "That's far enough. Valente, turn around." "I'm merely here to see my aunt." Matteo's voice was calm, carrying on the wind. The leader laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He raised his stun baton, and it crackled with blue, menacing energy. "Turn around, last warning." But it was too late. 2 white vans, their headlights on high beam, screeched around the corner. News vans. Nova had done it. They had followed the chase. Live cameras, broadcasting to the entire city, were pointed directly at the warehouse. The Grey Watch leader froze, blinded by the lights, suddenly aware he was the star of the show. He couldn't shoot. He couldn't use excessive force. He did the only thing he could. He lunged, bringing the crackling baton down in a vicious arc, aimed at Matteo's head. Matteo moved. He wasn't a brawler, and he was a force of nature. He used the umbrella like a shield, the reinforced metal ribs deflecting the baton with a shower of sparks. He didn't strike back. He hooked the umbrella's curved handle around the leader's wrist, using the man's own momentum against him, and twisted. The leader roared as his wrist was torqued at an unnatural angle. The baton clattered to the wet concrete. Matteo spun, the canopy of the umbrella unfurling like a wing, and shoved the off-balance man into 2 of his own guards. It was over in 3 seconds, a clean, non-lethal, devastatingly elegant takedown, live for the entire city to see. The remaining guards hesitated, their hands on their weapons, staring at the cameras, then at their disarmed leader. The distraction was complete. I didn't wait. I swung myself from the catwalk, through a broken window, and into the cavernous darkness of the warehouse. I landed silently on a pile of canvas tarps. The air was hot and smelled of diesel fuel and ash. Below me, In the center of the vast concrete floor was the incinerator. Its heavy iron door was open, a monstrous square mouth of orange, hungry flame. Aurelia Valente was there. She was dragging a heavy steel footlocker. She heard the commotion outside, the shouts, the sirens. She saw the news lights flashing through the grimy windows. She panicked. She ripped the locker open. It was full, dozens of black leather-bound ledgers. "No!" she screamed, a sound of pure animalistic rage. She grabbed the books, armfuls at a time, and began throwing them into the fire. "No!" I yelled, my voice echoing in the huge space. I dropped from my perch, sliding 10 feet down a thick chain, my hands burning, and hit the floor running. Aurelia spun, her face a mask of hate, her silver hair wild. She saw me. She was holding the last two, thickest ledgers. She hefted one, drawing her arm back to throw it. I ran. I didn't run at her. I ran at the locker. I dove, sliding across the dusty concrete, my arms outstretched, my fingers snagging the edge of the steel box. The ledger she threw sailed over my head, disappearing into the white-hot core of the furnace. But I had the locker. I pulled it back, and my heart soared. She'd been in such a hurry. She'd missed one. A single, thick, black book was still wedged in the bottom. I scrambled backward, clutching it to my chest. Aurelia let out a howl. She dropped the last book and lunged for me, her manicured nails outstretched like claws. The main warehouse door exploded inward, ripped from its hinges by Mateo's team. Mateo stood in the doorway, framed against the rain and the flashing lights. Aurelia stopped. She looked at me, at the book in my arms. She looked at Mateo and the cameras behind him. She knew she was finished. And she smiled. She grabbed a rusted, heavy steel shovel from the wall, but she didn't swing it at me, or at him. She swung it with all her strength at the furnace's main control panel. With a deafening whoomph, the furnace's safety protocols failed. The blast doors blew open. A massive, rolling cloud of fire, sparks, and burning paper erupted from its mouth, billowing across the room, straight at me. I screamed, throwing my arms over my face, the ledger clutched against my apron. A shadow fell over me. A black canopy snapped open. Mateo. He was standing over me, his body shielding mine. The black umbrella held between me and the rain of fire. The sparks and red-hot embers hissed and died as they struck the treated fabric. His arm was wrapped around my back, his grip like a vice, pulling me against him, dragging me backward, away from the intense, scorching heat. "I have it!" I screamed, my voice raw, holding up the ledger. "I have the book!" "Oh, go!" he yelled, pushing me toward a side door I hadn't seen. Now! The air was filled with sirens, fire trucks, ambulances, police. The entire city was descending on Orchid Pier. He shoved me through the door, out onto the wooden planks of the pier itself. The water churned below. At the end of the dock, a sleek, low-profile speedboat bobbed in the water, one of his men at the helm. He half lifted, half threw me into the boat. He jumped in after me. Just as the first wave of firefighters burst into the warehouse, the engine roared to life. We sped away from the pier, the book safe in my lap, his arm still protectively around my shoulders. We disappeared into the dark, churning water, leaving the inferno and the flashing lights of Raventon behind us. The dawn over Harborview was a watery, bruised purple, but it was the most beautiful light I had ever seen. The storm had finally broken. The city, it turned out, had moved faster than the storm. Nova's quillcast hadn't just exposed the rot, it had triggered an avalanche. By the time the first real sunlight hit the wet streets, the Vermilion Trust's accounts, all 13 of them, were frozen by an emergency court order. Greywatch Solutions, facing a dozen lawsuits and the live-streamed, viral video of their leader being elegantly dismantled by Mateo's umbrella, had dissolved. They filed for bankruptcy at 4 a.m. Their logos were scraped off their vans before the sun was even up. And Aurelia, her last, desperate, suicidal charge in the pickup truck had been her end. She hadn't been arrested by the city cops she'd once owned. She was formally detained by the Raventon Integrity Commission, a brand new, civilian-led oversight committee, formed in the early hours by the lawyers of the Freedom Legal League. The single black ledger I had saved from the fire was their founding document. The community, the one she had tried to bulldoze, had risen up and become its own authority. The Crown Street Diner was unrecognizable. By 9 a.m., it was packed. It wasn't just the breakfast crowd, it was standing room only. It was lawyers in rumpled suits, students from the university, old women from my apartment building, all huddled around tables, drinking coffee and organizing. A large glass pickle jar sat on the counter, a piece of cardboard taped to it. The Rain Umbrella Fund. It was overflowing with $5, $10, and $20 bills, all to help the tenants who had been pushed out. Mr. Henderson, his face glowing with a pride I had never seen, was flipping pancakes for free. I was pouring coffee. My hands ached, my body felt heavy with exhaustion and adrenaline, and I was still wearing Mateo's torn, glass-scarred suit jacket. I wasn't just a waitress. I wasn't a victim. People touched my arm as I passed, their eyes full of respect. I was the girl who had walked into the storm and come out holding the proof. At 10:30, the diner door jingled. The constant, hopeful chatter of the room died. He stood in the doorway. He wasn't the boss, he wasn't the phantom, he was just Mateo. He wore a simple dark sweater and jeans, his hair still damp from a shower. He had no bodyguards, no team. He was just holding his old, black umbrella, the one that had been scarred by fire and glass. The crowd parted for him. It wasn't fear. It was a deep, silent, human respect. They made a path for him from the door to the counter. But every eye in the room was on me. This was my diner. This was my choice. He reached the counter, and he looked tired. He slowly, carefully, folded the umbrella, the scarred fabric sighing, and placed it on the formica between us. "The commission is using the Black Book," he said, his voice quiet. "Just for me. They're rebuilding the Harborview Trust, the right way this time. It will be owned by the people who live there. 'Cause of you," I whispered. He shook his head, a small, firm gesture. "I'm leaving Raventon, for a while." My heart, which had been soaring, stopped. "There are accounts to close," he said, his eyes on the umbrella, not on me. "Old shadows to clean up, far from here. Aurelia was just one part of the Orchid Circle." He finally looked up at me, his dark eyes full of a sadness that tore at me. "If I stay, Elena, you will never be free. You will always be standing in my reign." He was doing the right thing, the noble thing. He was setting me free from the danger he carried, and it felt like he was ripping my heart out. I looked past him, through the shattered frame of the diner window, which was already being boarded up by volunteers. The sky was still a heavy, bruised gray. It could rain again at any moment. I thought of that first night, shivering, alone. I thought of him tilting his umbrella to cover me, his own shoulder getting soaked. I thought of him in the glass house, his hand on my back, his kiss a desperate, solid anchor. I thought of him standing between me and the fire. He was right. His world was a storm, but it was the only place I had ever felt completely, entirely safe. I looked at his hand, the one with the calloused knuckles, resting on the counter. I reached out, in front of Mr. Henderson. In front of the new Raventon we had built, I put my hand on top of his. He looked up, his eyes wide with a sharp, sudden, beautiful shock. "People don't need the rain to stop to walk under an umbrella," I said, my voice clear and strong in the quiet room. "They just need the person holding it to walk at the same pace." A sound broke the spell. Not thunder, the screech of tires, the roar of a large, abused engine. It happened in a fraction of a second. A massive, rusted blue pickup truck, the kind used by industrial crews, jumped the curb. It plowed through the diner's flimsy patio tables, its engine screaming, and headed straight for the front window, straight for me. In the driver's seat, her face a mask of pure, primal hatred, her silver hair wild, was Aurelia. She hadn't been rescued by a team. She had escaped, one last, desperate, suicidal attempt to take the one thing we had both fought for. I was frozen. Matteo was not. He didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed two things, me and the umbrella. He moved, twisting his body, pulling me out of the line of fire. He yanked me to the ground behind the heavy, solid oak of the counter, his body covering mine completely. In the same motion, he snapped the umbrella open with one hand, holding it up as a shield. The front of the diner exploded. A tsunami of glass and twisted metal blew into the room. The sound was deafening. The truck's massive grill smashed through the window frame, stopping just inches from where we had been standing. I screamed as the rain of safety glass, sharp as needles, cascaded down on us. It hammered against the taut, black fabric of the umbrella. Matteo held it steady, his arm locked, his body a solid weight on top of me, absorbing the entire impact. Then, silence, a ringing, dusty, shocked silence. Before Matteo could even move, the truck door was ripped open. But it wasn't his men. It was the construction workers from the diner. It was Mr. Gable, holding a tire iron. It was a dozen people from the Rain Umbrella Fund, the Neighborhood Watch, the New Community. They swarmed the truck, a wave of civilian justice, and dragged a screaming, struggling Aurelia from the cab, restraining her before she could take another breath. The community was protecting itself. The ringing in my ears slowly faded. I was breathing in the smell of dust, wet wool, and his skin. He hadn't moved. "Matteo," I whispered. He rolled off me, his movements stiff. He was shaking. Not from fear. His dark sweater was torn at the left shoulder. A long, jagged shard of glass was embedded in the heavy muscle, and blood was welling up around it. I knelt in the glass, my hand hovering over the wound. "It's nothing," he gritted out, but his face was pale. "Enough," I said, my voice breaking. I put my hand flat on his chest, feeling his heart hammer against my palm. No more running, not from her, not from me. He looked into my eyes. All the shields were down. All the shadows were gone. There was just Matteo. He cupped my face, his calloused thumb wiping a streak of dust from my cheek. I leaned in, and in the middle of the ruined, glass-strewn diner, surrounded by the wreckage of his past, I kissed him. It was soft. It was certain. It was a promise that tasted like coffee and gunpowder and home. We stood up, his hand gripping mine, our foreheads resting against each other. Outside, through the shattered frame of the window, I saw something impossible. The heavy, gray clouds were breaking apart, a single, sharp, golden ray of sunlight pierced the gloom, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the diner. The rain had stopped. Matteo looked at the clean, blue patch of sky. A slow, tired smile touched his lips. He picked up the umbrella. It was torn, scarred by the glass, but still whole. He opened it, one last time, and held it over my head, even in the sunlight. "Keep it, no," he said, his voice rough, "just in case the weather changes its mind." I laughed, a real, shaky, joyful laugh. I reached up and put my hand on the handle, next to his. "It's fine," I said. "I have someone to hold it with me." The Rain Umbrella Fund became a permanent, community-run institution. The Crown Street Diner, rebuilt by volunteers, became its unofficial headquarters, a place where you could get a hot meal and free legal advice from the Raventon Freedom Legal League. And Matteo, he didn't leave. He stayed. He dismantled his gray operations, piece by piece, and poured that capital into the Harborview Dockhouse, a new, legitimate community trust, managed by the residents themselves. He didn't just repay his debt, he rebuilt the bridge. It's quiet now. The diner is warm. It's almost midnight. The familiar sounds the clink of a spoon against a thick ceramic mug, the low hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversation. On the shelf behind the counter, next to a vase with a single, perfect white orchid, a symbol we had taken back, hangs a black, scarred, perfectly folded umbrella. Mateo sits across from me, in booth 4, his booth, my booth. I slide a slice of apple pie toward him. He actually takes a bite. I look at him, the man who had walked out of the shadows and into my reign. Tonight, I say, no secret plans, no spies, no saving the world, just dinner. He looks up, and his eyes, dark and certain, meet mine. He smiles. And a long walk home, he says, under the same umbrella. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you are all listening from tonight, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. And if you want to support this story, please hit the hype button to help it be heard by more people.